sales with gimmicky covers and
triple gatefold, holofoil.
Yes, exactly. G2, you see, yeah. You know, everything had a die-cut cover or a glow-in-the-dark cover, and it sort of artificially inflated the comics industry. People started investing almost in first issues, and you get these incredible sales, and then a massive drop-off. And mid sort of 90s, everything fell apart. You know, Marvel was, I don't know, that was when they went bankrupt, but there was certainly, you know, a lot of layoffs. All the British freelancers, bar a few, more or less lost their work at Marvel US because there was less to go around, and fair enough, it went to the locally sourced talent. But so really, my comics career hit an absolute, you know, belly dive at the time. It was gone, more or less, and I had a few odds and sods. I was working for Acclaim on Turok, and I did a few bits for Wildstorm. I did a few backups and a few extra. I think I did Bloodshot as well for Valiant Acclaim, but it was dribs and drabs. You know, I consider the nadir of my career, and it's nothing to do with the quality of Rugrats itself, but I was writing Rugrats stories, and it wasn't really my thing. It just wasn't. I'm just not very good at that. And you know, and I just felt.
I mean, the issue where Chucky ripped that guy's head off, though, was classic. Sucked into a time vortex. It's one of the standard.
Drawn by Jeff Seymour.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so you know, it wasn't a good time, and everything I thought was ending really at that point. Transformers had gone, and I really did think it was gone at that point. Then I got the job at Titan Books as an editor there. And that was kind of strangely the first step, even though I didn't realise it, to sort of the regeneration of things. Because, okay, meanwhile, I didn't realise that there were bot-cons. You know, I didn't realise that Transformers conventions were a thing. Until in 1997, Andrew Wildman and I were invited out to that year's bot-con. What's a bot-con? It's a Transformers convention. There are Transformers conventions. There are Transformers fans. Who knew?
I think there are still Transformers conventions now. I'll check in a minute on the phone.
Honestly, we were slightly confused by the whole thing, and then there was Beast Wars, which we hadn't even heard about. And you know, again, it was a case of watch these these VHS videos of a few episodes and write us a story around the two exclusives, which were Pack Rat and Fractals, I believe. And so we wrote a story. I wrote a story called Ground Zero that Andrew drew. You know, and it was sort of done in a sort of sepia, black and white, not quite colour thing. And this was the first Transformers I'd done, obviously, in a few years. It was a completely different iteration of Transformers that we weren't even sure was connected to one at all. And so, yeah, it was something like, wow, Transformers is a thing. And my first bot-con was a little bit embarrassing because I'd be sitting here like this, and people are asking me questions that I'm like, I'm not sure.
In issue 53, yeah, 85, around 60, yes.
And so when I went back in 1998 to bot-con, I'd done my research a bit more. But Andrew and I both went to both of those, and it sort of reinvigorated things. And at 97, and then again at 98, I met Bob Ford and Larry DiTilio, the script editors and showrunners of Beast Wars, and a lot of cast as well I met. And that was when the conversation started about me doing an episode of Beast Wars. And suddenly, in my life where it hadn't been, Transformers was just a thing again. And I thought, this really is the beast that won't die.
And it's interesting because actually, just going through this, there's a lot of like being in the right place at the right times in this, isn't it? So even like you know, the flat in New York and stuff, and then BotCon, and then Beast was the first script writer, because then you went on to write those episodes of Beast Wars, but you went on to do more animation than you did back at. I don't think, did you do stuff before that?
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, yeah,
Oh yes.
the strange sort of long story short is that I was supposed to do just a G1 themed episode of Beast Wars in the general run of episodes. It was never meant to be the last episode. And I submitted a bunch of ideas to Bob and Larry, and all of which they kind of liked, but there was one in particular they latched onto, which was a sort of G1 Megatron-ish story. And that, in the end, that became a short novella story in a very hard to find now collection of Transformers prose short stories. But like I say, obviously that didn't happen, and suddenly it was like, well, Beast Wars is wrapping up, but we still want you to be involved. Would you like to co-write Nemesis 1 and 2 with Bob? And that was fabulous. And then yes, Bob, that was the end of Bob's involvement with Beast Wars, my involvement with Beast Wars, and Bob took me on to various shows that followed. I did about 10 or so episodes of a series called Roswell Conspiracies, Alien Myths and Legends, and then there was a CGI Dan Dare series and a few others, and yeah, it was great. Suddenly I was working in TV animation while I was double timing as a staff job at Titan. And then the little Titan story is that 2001, just before the Dreamwave and the sort of reinvention of Transformers came, I was agitating to reprint the Marvel Transformers stories. And Titan, the management of Titan, Nick Landau and his wife, were very much like, fine, if you can convince me there's an audience out there, we will look into buying the license. Yeah, well, I mean, I just basically took pictures from the BotCon conventions and said, look, this is your audience. If you can get worldwide rights on this, we will sell some books. And basically, yeah, that was it. Just before Dreamwave picked up the comic license, Titan picked up the graphic novel license, and that gave us carte blanche to reprint all the Marvel US and UK material. So we just got in under that sort of point where we probably wouldn't have got the license.
And that, well, that's where I started to. I hadn't read G2 up until that point because they hadn't all come out in the UK. Or I didn't live anywhere near a comic shop. So yeah, for me that filled in a lot of the gaps in my kind of knowledge of the lore as well for Titan. And actually, whilst I think of it, just your secret project, are you and Andrew opening a boutique brand of fragrances based on your favourite Transformers, which I assume is Grimlock and Galvatron?
Yeah, we'll have to do it based on all the ones with wind in there now.
You heard it here first. Yes, that would make sense.
Yeah.
That's why you're the brains, you see, and I just colour things. Okay, and that brings us neatly to Dreamwave. So at that point, they were like, they approached you, I assume, for this to say.
Yeah, there was a little bit where I just knocked on their door.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh yes, Simon, we really want you to do something for us. And I thought, well, you weren't contacting me, so it's just as well I contacted you. But no, they were great. And I know things didn't end well with Dreamwave jumping ahead, but at the time,
spoilers.
They were fantastically full of enthusiasm for the brand, and they were very welcoming and accepting of me, and there was no reason for them to be so, really. They had their own G1 launch. They didn't really need me involved, but they were very much like, yes, come on, what do you want to do for us? And it was really a blank piece of paper in terms of come up with something. So I came up with War Within, which they just said, yeah, absolutely. And I was, the gift from the heavens was Don Figueroa, because, someone had to redesign 60 to 100 characters into their Cybertronian forms, which Don just seemed to do, while
He knew how they went together. He knew how they transformed. It was amazing.
While eating toast or something, he could do it. My little Don story is I sat at, I think it was a San Diego comic convention next to Don, and people are coming up to Don to ask for a sketch, and it almost felt like they were deliberately asking for the most obscure characters possible. And Don would just go, right, and start drawing. And I said to him, don't you need to look at reference or something? No. And he just had a natural gift for Transformers, and you only have to look at the lenticular cover they did for War Within issue 1. And it wasn't just that the new Optimus Prime or the old Optimus Prime transformed. Don knew every step of the transformation and could draw it. So,
and that's the thing, when they made the toys based on they didn't have to fudge any of it. It was literally exactly as he drew it in both modes because he'd already thought it through.
Yes.
What I did want to do, I'm just going to, I'm hoping this next button works, before we get too far through the journey, I did ask in advance, there was a few bits and pieces, what I wanted to say is like, certain moments, certain iconic moments with some of your collaborators. I just want you to sort of like, how did you feel when this is like the beginning really of your kind of the future cast sort of, you may not have known it was going to be a magnum opus at the time, but tell us a bit about, about Jeff, about kind of what this moment means to you, the kind of the history of your work.
Yeah, I mean, Target 2006 was just one of those pivotal moments, and I don't think we really realised it. It's just that, I think what we realised was, because we had had it categorically from Marvel US that they weren't going to use the movie characters, that gave us a certain licence to tell a freer story, if you like. We didn't have to dovetail everything quite so neatly with the American stories that the UK comic was reprinting. So Target 2006 felt like we can be a bit more, epic or something in our thinking. We can push the boat out a bit. We've got a whole other time zone, and we've got the movie coming out at the time. We assumed the movie would be a massive, phenomenal cinema sensation and run for months and years, but wasn't the case. Didn't affect it.
It did in this movie.
It didn't affect anything really. And the other great thing with Target 2006 was, and we've done one already, Hasbro UK used to have TV advertising spots. And if we would marry up our comic stories and covers with their toy releases, we would get a spot at the end of their TV advertising. So we've done it with special teams, which necessitated, because they hadn't appeared in the US stories yet, which necessitated a kind of weird Matrix dream sequence, but nevertheless worth its weight to get the cover of the issue at the tail end of their TV advertising. Target 2006 and the New Leaders was the second time we did this. So yeah, it felt auspicious, it felt like the start of something, but yes, we didn't know how big a thing. And it was also the sea change. This is an interesting splash page because up to this point we were using toy reference here in the UK, whereas the US, and hadn't shared with us, had all the animated turnarounds of the characters.
And did they send the toys to the offices, or were they just photos? Or what?
No, we had a shelves of toys. Shelves of toys and flat packs, so we could carve them up and send to the artists. So yeah, that was our reference. And so Jeff Anderson here draws them toy, faithful to their toy versions. The very next splash page of the very next issue.
I don't know if that might be up right here.
No, okay.
They're not in the I'm sorry.
No.
They might pop up in a minute.
But anyway, they are, of course, in their movie-style animated. So yeah, it was another sea change.
It's a bit like when you have an end-of-season cliffhanger, and then all the actors come back and they've got different haircuts. It's all fine. Put on a bit of weight. Sorry, excuse me. So I think the Wreckers, it's fair to say, is an invention of yours that has lasted to the present day. So this is the first appearance of the Wreckers here? First time that you recalled that anyway?
Yeah, I mean the Wreckers was, and this issue is a strange one in as much as it drops out of the main storyline. it's a completely almost self-contained story within Target 2006. And the whole of Target 2006 was slightly me experimenting with different ways to write instead of just linear storytelling. There are flashbacks and jump forwards, and within episodes suddenly we're working backwards from the beginning. And it was just me also, and why I think of it as auspicious, it was me trying to push myself as a writer as well, and storytelling new and interesting ways, not new to comics, but other things I was drawing from other people's work. It's like, well, let's do sort of more slightly experimental storytelling and trust our audience to get it. And largely, I think we succeeded, and people just read it and didn't mind being challenged to work out that it was end backwards.
Yeah, and I think you've had horror influences, you've had sci-fi, we've had religious things, all sorts throughout the course of your work. So it's interesting to see. I've got to ask a question. Obviously, Impactor and Rack and Ruin. Did you just think I'm going to make 2 new characters, or did you think I could kill these guys off if I needed to, or what was the sort of inspiration for these kind of original characters?
Well, the Wreckers were largely, again, we always had an eye on what Paul Budiansky was doing in the American series. The Wreckers is largely made up of toy characters he hadn't used and wasn't going to use. So we had that certain license to use them with impunity. So he left, the Whirls and Roadbusters and Top Spins and Twin Twists out of his storylines. But, the structure was, I still apart from anything, I wanted a leader I could kill off at the end of the story. So, hence, Impactor came into life, and Rack and Ruin, it was a slight whimsy on my part, I think, this conjoined character who doesn't really speak much. It was just, again, we had that freedom to add in a little bit, even if we just tidied up at the end of it.
How did they use a keyboard? I have so many questions. Hammer and anvil on Earth.
There's other things that I wonder how they can do as well.
So a few differences here. So, Target 2006, I think it's fair to say this is one of the most iconic images that Jeff produced. You've had a long and illustrious career with Jeff Senior. Did you know at this point, with Jeff, did you think, okay, this is someone who, this work is someone I really want to be working with? Did you feel that straight away? When did that sort of, Jeff and I've got a good thing going, start to kick in?
I think it was probably a little before this. I think the first time, quite possibly the first time I worked with Jeff was on the Victory story that appeared in an annual. Annual stuff was written well in advance of the actual annual publication. So, Jeff's first story was written by James Hill and Mike Collins. So I hadn't actually worked with Jeff up to that point. And then, I wasn't the editor of Transformers, so I wasn't assigning artists to stories. So Ian had just, at that point, not put us together at all. But I think when I saw the Victory pages come in, and the sheer violence of them, and Jeff...
He's a very disturbed man, Jeff, isn't he?
Just how much, nothing is still in a Jeff Senior piece of art. And, that story in particular had such impact in 11 pages. I just thought, well, I really want to work with Jeff more. And, we got together on Target 2006, and I think it was Jeff at some of his best storytelling and best art.
It's just the brutality of the hand going through the windows. It's so dynamic. And like with the Unicron, the scale thing, it's like, there's a moon, casually, just to give you a reference point. Some of these, pages as a kid reading these, it absolutely blew my mind, that kind of dynamic, energetic.
Having Jeff draw that first appearance of Unicron was a somewhat happy accident, in as much as, my artist really was Jose Delbo on the US series. But at the time, Jose was prepping to work on Brute Force. Okay. So it was double timing it a bit with Transformers. And luckily, Don Daly, the editor, turned to me and said, we need a fill-in artist. I'm just the man. And so, you know, we managed to get Jeff auspiciously on this issue and then on several subsequent issues.
I think that might lead us to, in fact it doesn't, there is a double page spread supposed to be in here, there it is, okay. Again, I think, defining moment for me as a kid, for sure, Unicron turning up and just literally filling his face full of Cybertron. So yeah, I mean, at that point, you were the editor. Did you see the line work for this ahead of its publication, or did you pick up the issue and there it was? Like, did you see anything in advance to know what this was going to be like?
Jeff very rarely did what I'd call line work, because Jeff was inking his own stuff. He might do loose breakdowns, and then everything would come in the ink. So whatever I saw, I doubt it was anywhere near as finished. But you know, it was written as a double-page spread. You know, I kind of knew if Jeff was drawing that issue, it would be epic, and I really, really wanted Jeff to draw that issue. Thankfully, it wasn't a matter of denying Andrew work on that issue, because you know, Andrew was struggling to keep to his deadlines, and adding a double-sized issue at that point would have made it impossible, really. Yeah. So, you know, it worked fine, but yes, it was lovely to have Jeff. You know, it just, no one does epic quite like Jeff.
Yes, and I still, Scorpion on Space being melted off is still one of my top two traumas. So, on the subject of lunatics and reprobates, Andrew Wildman, also a regular collaborator there. Again, one of the, I did say there were top two things that haunted me, this is probably in there as well. The fused Megatron Ratchet, this body horror sort of surprise, and it was definitely not what I was expecting on the last page and flipping to the first. Yeah, what were you thinking? How were you feeling at the time when this popped into your mind?
Well, you know, I mean, I always wanted, you know, I never wanted to keep Megatron out of the storyline. When we bounced him out at the end of whatever it is, issue 59 or something, it was always meant to bring him back. But, you know, at what point it struck me to fuse them together in a horrible metaphor. I mean, the whole issue is a tribute to the films of David Cronenberg, which I absolutely love, and that body horror thing. And, you know, there is that sequence in this issue where it's literally the moment where he pulls the barrel over, which is from The Fly. So,
one of my absolute favourite films.
I make no bones about it. But yeah, you know, I just, again, the funny thing with, sorry to interrupt, just at this stage was, it was hell for leather with this comic, because, you know, when Bob Briansky handed me the reins, he also said it may only last 4, 5, 6 issues because sales are dipping.
We've heard that a few times in Transformers.
Yes, but you know, but any kind of idea of going at some sedate pace just wasn't there. So it was like, if we're going to bring Megatron back, bring him back soon, and do something horrible with him, and make it something else that leads to some other problem down the line. So, you know, there was a sort of foot on the accelerator all the time with these stories, just in case, as they did eventually say, that's it, that's your lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think that 20-issue sort of run there is like full-on gangbusters, pretty much from beginning to end. So, yes, and so that was the picture, that was, so this was your first Jeff that you saw then? Yeah, I can see why you might have been attracted to his work. But I've got to go to Time Wars here, because this is like one of my absolute, again, as a kid, just like, oh man, this comic's so cool. Yeah. Did you write, I want to see Galvatron literally skinned and eviscerated down to his internal parts, or?
I mean, some of this would have been in my description, but I'm pretty sure the eyeball thing, which I still reference, I've just literally been writing the latest Earth Wars saga that goes along with every character introduction they do in that game, and it has several eye-popping references in it, just because it really was a fabulous bit of overkill for that scene.
There was no messing around, I will
No.
say, with that. And it's why when people say to me, like, of all of the licensed comics and things that existed at the time, Transformers, the work that he did, he never talked down to anybody. It was never like, oh, this is for kids. It was very much like, you'll either catch up with us or you won't. And as a result, for me, like, reading it in my, you know, ages 4 to 10, like, but then reading it again 15, 20, you know, it never goes, oh, it's kind of kiddie-ish. You know, like, I've got He-Man comics and they're kind of kiddie-ish when you read them now, but it was always talking above the audience and saying, like, reach for this, which I thought, for me, was always something I appreciated from your work.
Yeah, and again, that was just me reading comics that didn't kind of care what age you were, you know, certainly in terms of vocabulary. You know, when I used to read Stan Lee's stuff, you know, he used words that I had to look up, and I thought, well, that's a good thing, surely. Yeah. So, you know, and also I didn't really want to write down because that would have, you know, changed the stories, you know, in a fundamental. And I really wanted to write stories that I
eye-popping.
Yeah, eye-popping indeed.
Absolutely. So I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to skip through a couple of bits just here. So for me, possibly the best design of Optimus Prime ever, is my personal view. Again, how did you feel when you were saying about Don's skills, but when you saw that Prime, it's perfectly Prime, it's exactly him, it's totally different, like that skill of that artist.
Well, Don did the heavy lifting here. This is where I didn't really even try to say, other than, well, Megatron might be a tank which wasn't very reach, you know, well, a Cybertronian tank. I don't think I gave Don much in the way of steers in terms of the vehicular or other modes. So, you know, the look is really Don's work, you know, and he was just, you know, the way he could literally sort of reverse engineer characters was incredible. So, you know, I can take no credit for this.
I picked a couple here we briefly mentioned them, but so this sort of statement of intent really of Shockwave, again, when you saw this for the first time, were you kind of like, yeah, again, is Don's doing the work, or?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the great thing about Shockwave was nothing had to be done with Shockwave.
Giant gun,
yeah,
can't go wrong.
A giant space gun. And, you know, but it's just, again, you know, the other great thing about Don is, like Jeff, if you give him a splash page, he will make it count.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes splash pages, you sort of see them and you think, well, that's okay, but somehow I envision something with more oomph to it. But Don also was an artist who could deliver when you gave them the double page spread or the splash page.
And that's what they're there for. If you're not using a splash for the impact, then you're sort of... So on the subject of splash pages with impact, again, so we're into you know, IDW now. I think we've probably told the story of the beginnings of IDW, so I was trying to ask you a question you haven't had before. But again, some things you've revisited, Shockwave versus Dynamos, as being a sort of almost like a continuing itch to be scratched. What is it about that combination then that kind of keeps bringing you back? Is it just...
I mean, there are a couple of my favourite issues from Bob's run for a start, the Shockwave storyline. I thought it was a very clever way of introducing, you know, in the Savage Land, which you now can't really mention because it's a Marvel thing, but, you know, it made more sense than the other way around. So when we came to, I mean, I've done Transformers 84 and here, but here we tried to do it, you know, everything in IDW, the kind of basic thing was, don't do it the same way. If it's been done one way, try and do a little twist on it, do a little revisionary idea about it. So every character, every storyline, do it in a slightly different way. And, you know, I think I may have suggested to Nick that this is sort of semi-Beast Wars referential in it, and it's all very much like, you know, they have to resist Energon rich atmosphere and things, but again, you know, brilliant choice of artist for it, because he just completely got what I was after on this.
And was this Nick's first, I forget now, was this Nick's first Transformers?
I think it was his first, I think it was his first published.
Spoilers, it worked out for Nick as well. What I wanted to just actually was, I think of it, just this question about your secret thing. Are you and Andrew launching your own cryptocurrency?
Yes. I'll give everybody the details of that. All donations will, all investments will be looked after.
You're in on the ground level, guys, so. So what I wanted to do, so there are small bits, but what I wanted to do is make sure that if anybody in the audience has a question they want to ask, I want to make sure there's, look at that, the hand flew up, right, just there. Do you want to come and ask a question?
So Dreamwave went bankrupt. Were there any storylines that you didn't get finished like you wanted to?
Yeah, there were many, unfortunately, and I hate, of all the things I hate, it's not finishing a storyline. And so Age of Wrath, the third War Within, ended with issue 3. Issue 4 was done completely, and the rest of it was all, scripted or plotted. Energon, which I was thoroughly enjoying working on with Alex Milne. We had the rest mapped out up to the point it was going to become Transformers Cybertron, the comic version. And Beast Wars, which I started on with Don, which kind of became adapted into the IDW Beast Wars. And I'd also just written a story for the G1 book, which was going to tie into the Fallen and the Dark Ages. So yes, lots of things. There is somewhere still, I think it exists, a blog I put up with a lot of the old unpublished plots and storylines from the end of Dreamwave, which still exists somewhere. I think David Wallace found it, and it still exists. So they are readable in terms of what I was intending, but yeah, sadly.
And do you still have, I don't know if they're on your table, do you still have the scripts and the outlines? You used to do little packs of those?
Yeah, I haven't brought them with me for a while, but I do sometimes unearth the scripts and plots for those issues that never were and bring them as little packs.
Nothing, any other questions? I think it's...
Random question, what's your favourite story you've written for Transformers or just comics in general?
It's really hard to tie it down to one. I sort of have favourites in different eras with Transformers. It's probably Target 2006, and then the Unicron saga, and then War Within, and then Infiltration, which was the first time I got to start a Transformers story. Normally I come in a little bit in and join it, but Infiltration was the first time I got to start a Transformers storyline. So, I have a great love for that series, and all of that early IDW stuff was such a fun time to be writing Transformers. And, I loved that, we had EJ, who could, again, just do that lovely balance between real world and giant robots, and make both work.
I think we've probably got time for one more question.
A couple of things. First off, obviously in the years, obviously Grimlock has become known as your signature character. Aside, also appreciated the updated Dinobot designs in Spotlight Shockwave. Was there a point where, at what point did you really start to be really attached to the character? Was it at least you heard of him, or was there sort of more, did he kind of grow on you after a while?
Well, I think in terms of the toys, he was just, to me, the coolest of the lot. He was a T-Rex. And he just looked like a good character, and Bob had used him really well, I thought. But I wasn't quite happy with the sort of slightly dumb Grimlock. I just thought there was potentially more. And when Bob marches the Dinobots out of his storyline, they were just available to us. We were always looking for the characters he kind of finished and moved sideways. So, they were just available, and, those first few stories with Grimlock, I just thought that this is such a great character, and I can add layers. And I think intrinsically what I like about Grimlock was that he's not really an Autobot, he's not really a Decepticon, he's somewhere in the middle. He treads that fine line between, he could be as bad as the Decepticons, he could be as good as the Autobots, and I like characters like that. As a writer, there's more you can do with a character who could go either way. You know Optimus Prime is always going to do the right thing. You know Megatron is pretty much going to want to conquer planets. But Grimlock, you always felt like there's a character who has to make a conscious effort to do the right thing, and I think that's very attractive for a writer.
All right. I'm sorry we've run out of time. However, what I will say is Simon is here all weekend, so please go and say hello to Simon and ask your question in person. But I just want to say thank you all for coming. I want to say thank you to Simon for 40 years of an incredible franchise that you know, storytelling that changed my life and genuinely changed what I wanted to do with my life. So I know I've thanked you before, but I will always be grateful, and I'll always be grateful for being able to join you on the journey of collaborating with you. So just to really say a huge thank you to Simon and a big round of applause.